Marx Hubbard is an internationally known expert on positive options for the future, an author, and spiritual visionary. In 1984, her name was placed in nomination for the office of Vice President of the United States. She is the mother of 5 and now tending to another birth, the birth of humanity into the next stage of evolution. Our story begins with an understanding of how Barbara came to write the Book of Co-Creation.
Just in February 1980, I rented a little house in Santa Barbara, California. For the first time in my life, I thought I'd go and be by myself and write to see if I could get this whole pattern of ideas on paper. And I had my paper, my pencil. I got up at 6 in the morning, morning after morning after morning, and I had a writer's block. I could not get it out. There were too many ideas. They were pressing at my mind. Finally, I surrendered. One day I gave up, I called my sister, and I said, Jacqueline, let's just have some fun. So we took a drive in Santa Barbara on an exquisite day, a brilliant blue sky, headed for the botanical gardens. And I was truly in a state of carefree delight when I saw a little sign that said Mount Calvary Monastery. Suddenly, for the first time in my life, I've never experienced anything like this, an electric field of light seemed to surround me. I felt an inner static electricity, like a resonation. And I said, Jacqueline, we're going to Mount Calvary. And I literally swerved the car off the road, heading up a little hairpin turn in a mountain in Santa Barbara, heading to Mount Calvary Monastery. And Jacqueline said, I thought we were going to the Botanical Gardens. Why are we going to Mount Calvary? I said, I don't know, but I've been here before. And the tears were streaming down my face. I felt an enormous sense of anticipation. I could hardly breathe, and as we climbed higher and higher and higher, we got to a plateau, and there was a little tiny monastery. I got out of the car with a deep sense of anticipation and looked upward into the blue sky, and from a higher mountain, a hang gliders club was jumping off, and there were hundreds of people in butterfly wings floating in weightless ecstasy above Mount Calvary. That image of metamorphosis penetrated my consciousness. The light field surrounded me again, and I heard an inner voice. It was not audible, it came from within, but it was not me. And the words were, my resurrection was real. I did it. It is a forecast of what the human race will do collectively when you love God above all else, nature as self, your neighbor also as yourself, combined with science to understand the laws of nature. You shall not all sleep, you shall all be changed. Will you agree to this, Barbara? I need demonstrations. And my own inner voice said in response, yes, I choose to be a demonstration. I choose to be like you, but I don't know how. And the presence said, you choose it, I'll do it. You don't have to know how. Did you know how to do puberty? Did you know how to be born? Did you know how to build a universe? You don't have to know how, you simply have to choose it. Intuitively, I knew that was so, that we are now at a stage where the system is ready to evolve, but it will not be unconscious, it will be by conscious choice. I sat there in deep communion with a presence that I experienced as the risen Christ. That very night, I was there, and I decided to go into the library just at random to pick any book to give me some guidance. I had this deep sense of expectation. The first book I picked at random was a book on crucifixions written by a doctor. And he had examined the whole study of crucifixions and the Shroud of Turin in a study to convince himself as to whether or not this incident in history had happened. And there were pictures of the shroud and pictures of various kinds of crucifixions, and he convinced himself from that shroud that Jesus of Nazareth actually had been crucified, had been laid in that cave, surrounded with that shroud, and had emerged as a new being. I went to bed that Friday evening with the experience of the crucifixion in my own body from having read it. The next morning, every morning the monks give communion. It is an exquisite environment looking over the sea. And I was the only woman. I was dressed in my ordinary tennis shoes and jeans, and these Anglican priests were dressed in white and gold, and they gave me Holy Communion. I went back and sat in the little wooden pew and was praying and meditating about this experience when the voice started again. And this time it said, "The communion ceremony is to become the union ceremony. You have taken the bread and the wine in remembrance of me. You are now to perform an inner ceremony to become me." And I was instructed on the inner plane to create that image of the cave, to see the Shroud of Turin, to visualize it becoming a body of light, and to literally place my own body in that body of light until the inner vibrations at the atomic level picked up that vibration of light. So I conceived of the cave, I brought myself in there, and I saw the Shroud of Turin becoming a body of light. I placed my body in that body, and I felt a very profound inner light. And as I rose in my mind's eye out of that cave, I felt that I was in the process of becoming a resurrected being, a new humanity. And I heard the words, "Go look at the predictive passages in the New Testament." So I got a little Bible. I went and sat in this garden, beautiful flowers and a wonderful big golden cross and the blue sky. And I turned to a passage in Corinthians. I had my journal in my lap. "Behold, I show you a mystery. You shall not all sleep. You shall all be changed. In the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, and the trumpet shall sound. This mortal flesh will become immortal. Death shall have no dominion." And with that, I began to write. The floodgates of my mind were opened. I realized that every idea, thought, image that I had learned about at the growing edge of futuristic possibilities, the biological revolution, the information revolution, the astronautic revolution, the psychic revolution, the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligence, all of that far out thought came right up in, and I saw, oh my God, Jesus is the potential self of the human race. He did it. And he said, we shall do the works that he did, and even greater works in the fullness of time, because he goes to the Father, because he did it. And I realized that all of evolution had been leading to this point, that Jesus was a being who manifested the new pattern of creation. He established the template and told us that we would do it too. I went from passage of Scripture to passage of Scripture. My process was I would read Scripture, I would not think, I would not figure it out, I would just allow the inner knowing to dictate to me what to write. I spent several hours writing at the fastest speed I could. Then I went back to Matthew 1 and started at the beginning. And I realized that the entire Scripture is coded evolution. The way Jesus was born, the way he was at one with God from the beginning, the way he could control the material world, the idea that we should all be heirs of God is what evolution indicates. I became ecstatically joyful, and I decided to cancel everything, all my appointments, all my speeches. And for the next 6 months, morning after morning, I arose, I read a passage of scripture, I wrote, and I realized that what I was doing was I was receiving an evolutionary interpretation of the New Testament. It was telling our generation that we can do the works, that Jesus the Christ is the potential of every man, woman, and child. That it's not one person who was the Son of God, it's every man, woman, and child who is the son and daughter of God. And it says that due to the rapid rise of consciousness in so many millions of souls on earth, ordinary people like myself, there is a new dispensation being given. Armageddon is not necessary. Armageddon is what will happen if self-centered consciousness prevails, but self-centered consciousness is not prevailing, even though it is still clustered at the heads of states and institutions and amplified through our media. Under the surface of those collective fears is a whole generation of consciousness which is already centered in God, which is already connected, which already knows. And the alternative to Armageddon, says this text that I wrote, is a world instant of cooperation with each other, with nature, and with God. The inner Christ will rise in each of us. The cosmic Christ, the presence of the being who did it first, will connect with the presence within each of us. And the entire human species, in an instant in time, will be awakened to the fact that we are a co-creative species, at one with God, at the dawn of the universal age, in a universe of many mansions.
6 months of daily writing resulted in 2,000 pages of manuscript typed on both sides. The voice of the text, the Christ, tells us why it was written.
This text is a call to action, written for those who intend to do as I did and more. The commandments in this text are coded instructions for universal life. They could not be fully understood until the capacity to act upon them had matured. They were lodged deep in the human mind as aspirations to be fulfilled in the fullness of time. These are the technologies of co-creation: nuclear, genetic, electronics, astronautics, cybernetics, and psychic. One generation of humans has known of the existence of these capacities combined. They are the essential components of your access to the tree of life. This text was written not to add or to subtract from the divine book of Revelation. It was written to inform you of the alternative to Armageddon.
The patterns of the evolutionary past suggest that a positive future is a reasonable choice. A broad perspective is needed.
The evolutionary perspective is the broadest possible perspective of the universe. It starts back at the origin of creation, some 15 to 20 billion years ago, the first turn on the spiral, the magnificent explosion of subatomic particles. The second turn on the spiral, 4.5 billion years ago, our solar system and Earth, solid material formed. 3.5 billion years ago, single-celled life emerged in the early seas of Earth. For millions of years, those single cells divided and divided to reproduce, and at some point they hit a limit to growth, an overpopulation, a stagnation, and there was another turn on the spiral. Multicellular life, plants, animals, the biosphere was formed, the origin of the species. And we go all the way up through the animal world, millions and millions of years, until you get to the next turn on the spiral, the origin of human consciousness. Another quantum leap. And you have all of human history, starting even with Neanderthal, burying food with the dead, some intimation of something more to come. Adam and Eve go for the tree of life, the
tree of immortality, the tree of the gods. As we climb up the spiral, we get to Egypt, the first sign of the regenerating being. India, the first sign of cosmic consciousness. Greece, the first sign of understanding the laws of nature. Israel, the first sign that we are to be partners with God for the transformation of the world. Christ, a first template of humanity, harbinger of the next stage of evolution. Then all of modern history, science, democracy, great tools of transformation, leading up to the modern age, the explosion of the atomic bomb, a signal that we are about to go around the next turn on the spiral. Our generation is living through that turn on the spiral, and when we complete that loop, we will be a universal species. Beyond planet-boundedness, beyond separation, beyond scarcity, beyond degeneration, in a universe of many, many planetary systems, what was predicted by the religions of the world and what is being discovered by the sciences of the world is about to be acted out in evolution.
In order to examine the implications of the evolutionary perspective and to further express the content of the Book of Co-Creation, the producer invited 5 individuals to a studio environment where their dialogue could be taped. Guests were asked to field questions to Barbara so that this program would be a documentation of the key ideas of the book rather than an interpersonal discussion of them. Barbara's guests include Reverend Jerry Schober, Judson Edwards, Jean Rogers, John Howland, and Sister Regina Winters.